My name is Mark, and I used to think I had the perfect life. I lived in a charming suburban neighborhood, in a comfortable two-story house with a white picket fence. My wife, Corinne, was everything I had ever hoped for in a partner. She had long, wavy brown hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up any room. We had been married for 6 years, and on the surface, we seemed like the ideal couple. I was a project manager at a construction firm, while Corinne worked as a marketing executive. We both had steady jobs, and there was a sense of routine and stability in our lives. Our weekends were typically filled with mundane chores and casual outings. We often went to the farmer's market, had dinner with friends, or enjoyed a quiet evening on the couch watching movies. There were no wild adventures or dramatic twists in our lives, but I was content, or so I thought. Life in our neighborhood was typical of suburban America. Families walked their dogs, kids played in the streets, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. The sense of community was palpable. However, underneath that idyllic surface, I sensed something lurking, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Perhaps it was the monotony of our routine or the whispers I occasionally overheard among neighbors, but I always felt a strange unease in the air. Then one evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find Corinne in the kitchen, preparing dinner. I noticed she seemed off, distracted, more than usual. I shrugged it off at the time, attributing it to the stress of work or maybe just a tiring day. But little did I know, that was the beginning of the unraveling of my world. As the days turned into weeks, Corinne's peculiar behavior escalated. She started receiving an unusual number of late-night texts, her phone always clutched tightly in her hand. Whenever I walked into the room, she would hastily tuck it away, as if hiding something from me. My gut told me something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Instead, I tried to ignore the gnawing suspicion that began to consume me. The turning point came one rainy Friday night. I had come home early, hopping to surprise Corinne with her favorite takeout. As I approached the house, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in our driveway. My heart raced. I tried to convince myself it belonged to a neighbor, but I knew better. The car was parked too close to our front door, and a sense of dread washed over me as I quietly approached the windows. Looking through the living room window, I could see Corinne laughing, her head thrown back in joy, but there was a man sitting next to her. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My heart sank as I watched their casual intimacy. I recognized the man as a colleague of hers from work. I had only met him once, but I remembered the easy charm he exuded, a charm I had always felt was too easy around Corinne. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to storm inside and confront them, but I felt paralyzed, glued to the spot. I stood there under the cover of the porch, watching them share a bottle of wine, their laughter echoing through the night. It was a cruel twist of fate, seeing her so happy, so at ease with someone else, while I stood there, broken-hearted and helpless. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled back to my car, feeling a mix of anger and despair. I had to confront this head-on. I wouldn't let this betrayal go unpunished. But how? That question lingered in my mind as I drove away, the rain hitting my windshield like the tears I couldn't shed. I knew I had to come up with a plan. I wouldn't just let her get away with it. I would make her feel the same pain I was feeling, and I would find a way to make it hurt. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and overwhelming betrayal. I felt like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The image of Corinne laughing with that man haunted me. I replayed the scene over and over in my mind, each time feeling the knife of betrayal twist deeper into my heart. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. I needed to gather more information, to know exactly what I was dealing with. I took to observing her more closely. I began to notice the little things I had overlooked before. The way she would text at odd hours when she thought I was busy or asleep, the way she would change the subject if I ever brought up her work, and how she started to dress more provocatively on the evenings she went out. The signs were all there, and it made my skin crawl. One night, while Corinne was out for her weekly yoga class, I decided to dig deeper. I knew her phone was usually unlocked when she was home, and curiosity got the better of me. I cautiously picked it up from the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I opened her messaging app. I found the usual group chats with friends, but what caught my eye was a thread with that colleague, Jake. Scrolling through, my stomach turned as I read their conversations. They were flirty, filled with inside jokes and references to late-night meetings that made my heart race with anger. There were messages where she told him how much she enjoyed their time together and even hinted at wanting to meet up outside of work. Each message felt like a slap to my face, confirming my worst fears. I struggled to breathe as I realized this wasn't just an innocent friendship, it was something far more intimate. I couldn't take it anymore. I put her phone back down, my hands shaking. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my rage and heartbreak. It was one thing to suspect infidelity, but to have the evidence laid bare in front of me was devastating. I decided right there and then that I would not confront her yet. I would gather more evidence, and then I would make her pay for what she had done to me. The next day I took a day off work, claiming I wasn't feeling well. I needed to put my plan into action. I decided to follow her to see exactly what was going on. I knew her schedule well enough. She had another meeting with Jake that afternoon, a supposed work gathering. I waited until she left the house and then I quietly followed her. As I drove, I felt a mix of adrenaline and dread. When she parked at a cozy cafe downtown, my heart sank. I positioned myself far enough away that she wouldn't see me but close enough to keep an eye on her. I watched as she entered the cafe, her demeanor bright and bubbly, nothing like the woman I felt I knew. Then Jake arrived. I could see them through the window, their body language telling me everything I needed to know. They were not just colleagues, they were engrossed in conversation, leaning in closer, their laughter ringing through even from my distance. I wanted to storm in and demand answers, but I knew I had to hold back. I had to be strategic about this. After a while, they finished their drinks and headed out. I followed them to a nearby park where they found a secluded bench. I watched as they exchanged light touches and laughter. It was infuriating and heartbreaking all at once. I felt a sickening mixture of hate and sorrow. It was unbearable. I snapped a few photos with my phone, documenting their rendezvous, knowing that these would be crucial for my plan. I wanted to have undeniable proof of her betrayal, something I could throw back at her when the time came. Watching them together felt like I was living in a cruel movie, and I was the unwilling spectator, trapped in a world of pain. For hours, I sat there waiting, feeling the rage building inside me like a pressure cooker. I imagined confronting her right there, exposing her unfaithfulness in front of Jake, but I knew that wouldn't accomplish what I wanted. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. As the sun started to set, I finally saw them part ways. Corinne walked back to her car, and I took one last look at her before I slipped away. It was time to put my plan into motion. I would use the information I had gathered to make her feel the full weight of her betrayal. My mind raced with ideas, each one more elaborate than the last. I wanted her to realize what she had lost and how much she had hurt me. The next step was crucial. I had to be meticulous in my planning. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I intended to savor every moment. As I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away from the cafe, the reality of what I had witnessed began to sink in. The anger that had built up inside me was now tinged with a sense of clarity. I had the evidence I needed, but more importantly, I had a target. I needed a plan that was not only effective but would also make Corinne feel the weight of her betrayal in a way that was both undeniable and unforgettable. I spent the next few days carefully constructing my plan. The first step was to gather all the evidence I could. I compiled screenshots of their text exchanges, the photos I had taken of them together, and even a recording I made when I followed them to another coffee shop a few days later. I caught them having a heated discussion that hinted at a deeper relationship. My heart raced as I replayed those moments in my head, knowing that this would all be ammunition when the time came. But mere documentation wasn't enough. I needed to expose Corinne's infidelity in a way that would truly resonate with her, something that would shake her to her core. I wanted her to understand how easily she had thrown away our marriage, how casually she had shared laughter and intimacy with another man. I decided that the best course of action would be to turn the tables on her completely. I started frequenting the same places as Corinne and Jake. I would casually visit the cafe or the park, making sure to bump into them occasionally. I wanted to plant seeds of doubt in her mind and make her feel uneasy. Each time I spotted them together, I would act as if everything was fine, maintaining a calm demeanor while my heart boiled with rage. One evening, I decided to throw a party at our house. I knew that Corinne had a few friends who were in on her secret, and I wanted to lure them into my trap. My idea was to create a scenario where I would confront her in front of our closest friends, exposing her betrayal for all to see. I wanted to make it clear that her actions were not just a private affair. They had ripple effects that touched everyone around us. I meticulously planned the guest list, ensuring that the friends who were more likely to support Corinne were invited, along with a few I knew would have my back. I wanted witnesses for the showdown. As the days passed, the anticipation built up inside me, but I kept a calm facade. I engaged in normal conversations with Corinne, even laughing and joking about the party as if everything were perfectly fine. The night of the party arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. The house was filled with laughter and chatter, and I made sure to keep the drinks flowing. Corinne was in high spirits, mingling with our friends, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. I had set the stage perfectly, and I felt an exhilarating rush as I watched her interact with everyone, oblivious to my silent scheming. As the night progressed, I noticed Corinne chatting with one of her close friends, Sarah. I could see the glances exchanged between them, and I knew they were discussing something important. My heart raced. The moment was approaching. I gave it a little longer, letting the anticipation build, before I finally decided it was time to make my move. I gathered everyone in the living room under the pretense of making a toast. The room quieted down, and I felt the eyes of our friends on me. I raised my glass, thanking everyone for coming and sharing in our lives. Then I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to build suspense. Before we continue with our fun, there's something I'd like to share, I said, my voice steady, but my heart pounding. I've recently come across some information that I think everyone here should know about. I watched as Corinne's smile faltered, confusion flashing across her face. I pulled out my phone, the screen already lit up with the damning messages between her and Jake. This isn't easy for me to do, but it seems that Corinne has been keeping a pretty big secret from all of us. I held up the phone, letting everyone see the messages. Gasps filled the room, and I glanced at Corinne, who was now pale, her hands shaking. I don't think any of you know this, but while we were busy building a life together, Corinne has been spending time with Jake here, I said, pointing to the screen. This is just a glimpse of what's been happening behind closed doors. I could see the color drain from her face as her mind raced to process what was happening. I continued, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. It's time for everyone to know who she really is and what she's been doing. You deserve to know what kind of person you're supporting. The room erupted in chaos. Friends exchanged stunned looks, some whispering while others confronted Corinne with questions. The betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog, and I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt wash over me. I knew I was doing this for my own sense of justice, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of remorse at the impact it would have on our friends, too. Corinne finally found her voice, stumbling over her words as she tried to defend herself. "Mark, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like," she pleaded, but the desperation in her voice fell flat against the weight of the evidence I had presented. I didn't let her finish. "No, Corinne, you've already had your chance to explain. It's my turn now," I shot back, feeling empowered by the chaos I had unleashed. I relished the shocked expressions on the faces of our friends, the realization dawning on them that the couple they thought they knew was crumbling before their eyes. As the night wore on and the initial shock subsided, I knew I had achieved what I set out to do. I had made my mark, exposed the truth, and driven a wedge between Corinne and her supporters. The fallout would be severe, but I was ready for it. I had to see this through to the end. The party quickly devolved into a scene of chaos. Friends who had arrived laughing and joking now stood in stunned silence, grappling with the betrayal that had just unfolded before them. I watched as Corinne's world began to unravel. Some of our friends sided with her, demanding to know what I had done to provoke such an outburst. Others looked at her with disappointment, their expressions mirroring the pain I felt inside. Corinne was trying to salvage what was left of her reputation, stumbling over her words as she attempted to justify her actions. "Mark, please, you can't do this to me. It was just a mistake," she pleaded, her eyes wide with panic. "You know I love you," but her words fell on deaf ears. I had made my point, and I refused to let her manipulate the narrative. "You think love means sneaking around and betraying your husband." I shot back, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "No, Corinne, this is who you are now, a liar and a cheater." The room was filled with a storm of emotions. Some friends shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered among themselves, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. I felt a sick sense of satisfaction and disgust. This was my revenge, and yet the stark reality of what I had done began to settle in. As the arguments erupted around us, I focused on what I needed to do next. I had exposed her, but I wanted more than just a public shamming. I wanted to ensure that Corinne understood the consequences of her actions, consequences that would follow her long after the party ended. I made my way to the kitchen, where I poured myself a drink, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. The laughter and music from earlier had been replaced by heated discussions and whispers of disbelief. I could hear snippets of conversations about Corinne's unfaithfulness, and it only fueled the fire within me. I knew she was beginning to realize just how much she had lost. I had prepared for this moment, so I pulled out a small USB drive I had tucked away in my pocket. It contained all the incriminating evidence I had gathered, the messages, the photos, even the audio recordings from my follow-ups. I had planned to use this as an insurance policy, something I could release if she tried to deny her infidelities or sully my name in the aftermath. As I stood in the kitchen, I overheard snippets of conversation that made me pause. "I can't believe she would do this to Mark," one friend said. "They seemed so happy." Another chimed in, "I saw it coming. She's been acting different for months." I could feel the weight of their words, the judgment that surrounded Corinne. I didn't want to be the villain in this story, but I felt justified. I had laid out the truth, and now it was up to her to face the consequences of her choices. I made my way back to the living room where she was still trying to salvage her dignity. I could see the tears welling in her eyes, the humiliation of being exposed weighing heavily on her. "Mark, please," she begged, her voice shaking. "I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake, I swear. We can work through this." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "You had your chance, Corinne. You made your choice. This isn't something we can just brush under the rug. You chose your path, and now you have to deal with the consequences." With that, I walked away, letting her continue to plead her case to the friends who were still there, trying to understand what had happened. I could hear the murmurs of disbelief, the mixture of support and betrayal echoing through the house. I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had taken back my power. The night wore on, and as our friends filtered out, the atmosphere shifted from chaos to an uneasy silence. I could feel the judgmental gazes lingering on Corinne, the whispers growing louder. I had successfully turned our social circle against her, and I knew it would take time for her to rebuild her reputation if she could at all. As the last guests left, I faced Corinne. She stood in the living room, tears streaming down her face, looking small and defeated. "Mark, I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I really love you." My heart hardened at her words. "Love? You don't throw away love like you did, Corinne. You've destroyed everything we built. Love is about trust, and you shattered that." "I'm so sorry," she cried, but her apologies felt hollow to me. I could see that she was more concerned about the fallout than truly remorseful. As I stared at her, I knew that I would never be able to look at her the same way again. I took the USB drive from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table. "This contains everything you've done. If you try to spin this narrative or twist the truth in any way, I'll make sure everyone sees it. You'll lose everything you have left." Her eyes widened in horror as she realized the extent of my resolve. "You wouldn't." she said, her defiance breaking for a moment. I leaned closer, my voice low and unwavering. Try me. I've already lost everything because of you. I have nothing left to lose. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, stunned and devastated. The weight of my actions pressed heavily on me, but I was determined to see this through. I had taken my revenge, but I knew the heartache was far from over. I spent the next few days in a haze of mixed emotions, anger, satisfaction, and sorrow. I had won this battle, but I knew the war was far from over. I needed to distance myself from her, to truly heal from the betrayal I had endured. With the evidence securely in my possession, I started to think about my future. I would no longer be the man who had been wronged. I would be the man who moved forward, stronger and wiser. The days that followed the party were surreal. I felt like I was in a limbo, hovering between the aftermath of my explosive revelation and the uncertainty of what my life would look like without Corinne. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, felt cold and empty. Every corner reminded me of the betrayal, the laughter we shared now replaced with echoes of hurt. Corinne, on the other hand, was a shadow of her former self. The confident woman I once adored seemed to have vanished overnight. She spent days locked in her room, avoiding conversations with me or our friends. I felt a mix of satisfaction and pity watching her unravel. She had been the one to shatter our lives with her choices. Now, she faced the consequences. I knew many of our friends had chosen to distance themselves from her, and gossip about her infidelity spread like wildfire. The shame she felt was palpable, and I was grateful for every ounce of it. As I navigated this new reality, I found comfort in the fact that I had stood my ground. I had exposed her deceit, and I wouldn't let her manipulate the narrative any longer. But there were moments when the weight of my actions pressed down hard on me. I had sought revenge, but now I grappled with the emotions that came from it. The fragility of love, once vibrant and alive, lay shattered at my feet. I had to accept the reality that I needed to move on and rebuild my life without her. One afternoon, I decided to meet up with a few friends who had been supportive during the chaos. We gathered at a local bar, and I was surprised at how much I needed this respite. As we talked and laughed, I felt a sense of normalcy return. They had seen the evidence of Corinne's deceit and had chosen to stand by me. "Are you doing okay, Mark?" my friend David asked, concern etched on his face. It must be a lot to process. I took a deep breath, contemplating my response. "I'm getting there. It hurts more than I thought it would, but I know it's for the best. I can't keep holding on to that betrayal." "Have you thought about what you'll do next?" another friend, Lisa, asked. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I know I need to focus on myself for a while. I want to rebuild, find out who I am outside of that marriage." As I spoke, I realized how important it was for me to reclaim my identity. I had poured so much of myself into my relationship with Corinne that I had lost sight of my own passions and interests. I decided, then and there, to channel my energy into things that made me happy. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work, took up running, and even started picking up hobbies I had neglected. I could feel the fog of despair slowly lifting, replaced by a newfound clarity. I began to feel like myself again, and it was liberating. However, there was still the nagging presence of Corinne. Although we had avoided each other in the house, her shadow loomed large over my life. I decided it was time for a final confrontation, a moment where I could assert my independence and truly close the chapter on our relationship. I arranged for us to meet one evening at a nearby coffee shop, halfway between our homes. As I walked in, I spotted her sitting at a table, her hands nervously fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. She looked up as I approached, and I could see the mixture of emotions flickering across her face: regret, sadness, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sitting down across from her. I kept my expression neutral, determined not to let her see how much her presence still affected me. "Mark, I know I've messed up," she began, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "You hurt me, Corinne. You had your chances to fix things, but you chose betrayal instead. I can't keep revisiting this pain." Tears welled in her eyes, and I knew she was struggling to find the right words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night. I realize how foolish I was, how much I took you for granted. I never meant to jeopardize our marriage. Then why did you? I asked, my voice steady. Why did you choose to betray me? I don't know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I was caught up in everything, work, the pressure, and I let it consume me. I thought I could keep it separate from my life with you. Her explanation fell flat. I had heard it all before. That's the thing, Karen, you can't have it both ways. You can't hurt someone you claim to love and expect them to forgive you without consequence. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right, she pleaded. I've even been thinking about therapy. I want to change. I shook my head, feeling the anger and hurt bubble to the surface. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat. I can't just forgive and forget, and I don't want to be a part of your healing process. I need to move forward, and that means leaving you behind. She looked down at the table, defeated. I understand. I just hope you find happiness, Mark. You deserve it, even if I don't. I hope you find it too, but it won't be with me, I said firmly. It's time for us to part ways completely. As I stood to leave, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had confronted her, asserted my boundaries, and made it clear that I was moving on. I walked away from that meeting feeling lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Over the next few weeks, I continued to focus on myself. I spent more time with friends, started dating casually, and explored new interests. Slowly but surely, I was reclaiming my life. The pain of betrayal lingered but began to fade, replaced by hope for a brighter future. Karen remained a ghost of my past, a lesson learned rather than a regret. I had taken my revenge, but ultimately, it was my own healing and growth that mattered most. I was ready to embrace this new chapter in my life, one where I could find happiness on my own terms. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. The initial chaos had faded, and in its place was a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in a long time. I focused on my work, threw myself into my interests, and rediscovered parts of myself I had forgotten during my marriage with Karen. I started jogging every morning, a simple routine that helped me clear my mind and gain perspective. I took up cooking, experimenting with new recipes that brought joy back into my life. On weekends, I began exploring nearby hiking trails, immersing myself in nature, a stark contrast to the confined walls of my old life. Each small step I took was a reminder of my resilience and determination to move forward. One day, while at a cafe I frequented, I met Sarah, a friend who had been supportive during the fallout with Karen. We struck up a conversation, and what started as a casual chat turned into a deeper connection. She was kind, understanding, and perhaps most importantly, honest. We began spending more time together, sharing our thoughts and experiences. Slowly, I opened up about my past, about the betrayal that had shaken me to my core. To my surprise, Sarah listened without judgment, offering insights that made me reflect on my own journey. You deserve to be happy, Mark, she said one afternoon over coffee. You've been through so much, but you're stronger than you think. Don't let what happened with Corinne define you. Her words resonated with me. I had spent so much time focused on the pain of betrayal that I had almost forgotten the importance of self-love and renewal. As Sarah and I grew closer, I felt a genuine warmth replacing the bitterness that had once consumed me. It was refreshing to connect with someone who saw me for who I was, not as an extension of someone else's actions. As the summer progressed, I found myself in a new relationship with Sarah. It was different from anything I had experienced before. There was no pretense, no hidden agendas. We were two individuals exploring life together, learning from each other's experiences. I cherished every moment, feeling a sense of hope I hadn't thought possible after my marriage with Corinne. Meanwhile, I made a point to keep my distance from Corinne. I stopped checking her social media, stopped asking friends about her. It was essential for my healing to cut those ties completely. I had made the choice to prioritize my own happiness and growth, and that meant letting go of the past. However, one evening I received a text from an unknown number. My heart raced as I opened it, only to see a message from Corinne. Mark, can we talk? I need to explain some things. I felt a surge of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, but more than anything, a sense of resolve. I had already confronted her, already put the pieces of my life back together. I didn't owe her anything anymore. I hesitated before responding, my finger hovering over the screen. Why now? I typed, trying to keep my emotions in check. What's left to say? Please. I want to apologize properly and tell you what I've learned, she replied, her words laced with urgency. I've been in therapy and I've realized how much I've hurt you and myself. I just want to make amends. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave me alone, to let me move on without her shadow lingering. But another part of me was curious. What had she learned? What could she possibly say that would make a difference now? After a moment of contemplation, I decided to meet her. I needed closure, one last conversation to put an official end to our chapter. I sent back a simple message. Okay, let's meet. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop where I had first confronted her. When I walked in, I felt the familiar pang of memories flood back. I spotted Corinne sitting at a corner table, her face a mixture of anxiety and apprehension. She looked different, more subdued, her once vibrant energy replaced by a somber demeanor. Thanks for meeting me, she said, her voice trembling as I took a seat opposite her. Let's just get this over with, I replied, wanting to get to the heart of the matter. I know I hurt you deeply and I'm truly sorry, she began. I've spent months in therapy and it's hard to face what I've done. I thought I could balance everything without hurting anyone, but I was so wrong. I listened as she spoke, recounting her journey of self-discovery and the realizations she had come to. It was evident that she had done some soul-searching, but I remained guarded. And what do you want from me now? I don't expect forgiveness, she said softly. I just want you to know that I'm working on becoming a better person. I'm learning how to take responsibility for my actions, and I hope you find happiness with or without me. Her words felt sincere, a stark contrast to the woman who had once betrayed me. Yet, as much as I appreciated her efforts to take accountability, I found I didn't have the capacity to forgive her yet. I needed to protect my own heart. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I've moved on. Corinne, I'm happy now and I can't allow the past to dictate my future, I said, my voice steady. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no urge to console her. I hope you can find peace too, I added, knowing that I had to put this chapter behind me. After a few more awkward moments of silence, we both knew it was time to end the conversation. I stood up, offering her a polite nod. Take care of yourself, Corinne, I said as I walked away, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. As I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face, a reminder of the new beginnings that awaited me. The weight of the past had been lifted, and I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I had confronted the ghosts of my past and emerged stronger. With Sarah by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I had learned that life is too short to dwell on pain and betrayal. Instead, I chose to focus on growth, love, and the promise of new experiences. The journey ahead was mine to shape, and I was determined to make it a beautiful one. I had taken my revenge, not just against Corinne, but against the hurt that had held me captive for so long. I was ready to live authentically with an open heart, and to truly embrace the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. The past was behind me and the future was bright. I took a deep breath, filled with hope, and stepped forward into my new life.